اختراع في كل جبال محل.
ليس مهما كما ظننت سأفعل.
صدقني الموضوع مختلف.
Far Cry Primal is a game released by Ubisoft Money Grubbers Incorporated, but this was a few years ago in 2016 when they were still putting up the facade of respecting their customers. Now, you can usually get it on sale for under $10, which is a good price, especially if you get it bundled with Far Cry 4 or something else. To summarize, it's the typical Far Cry formula taken back to the year 10,000 BCE, which sounds like a recipe for disaster. A franchise known for its guns, quite famously regarded as Skyrim with guns by a man whose brain is smoother than my nuts, does not immediately seem like a good fit for the Stone Age. However, this may be one of the greatest Far Cry games ever. If you're looking for historical accuracy, you won't find it here. It breaks down into the typical Far Cry formula: capture enemy outposts, explore a giant open world, collect natural resources, craft upgrades, hunt animals, etc. The Far Cry games had, up to this point, succeeded by bringing man back to the wild. That's kind of the idea of the franchise, man giving in to their dark animalistic nature. But coincidentally, that formula also works for a man who is already just living his animalistic life, so it's a decent time. You have to craft everything from healing salves to item pouches and even the clubs and spears you carry on you. You find the resources for this in the wild, or just steal them from other people you kill. But you're nothing without some friends. So you begin the process of creating a new home for your people against a backdrop of angry wildlife and angrier and cannibalistic locals. Your first few acquaintances are a woman who cuts off enemy ears to stop the screaming voices in her head, and a shaman who routinely has you both consume people parts. My next major friend pissed on me when we met. We're off to a cracking start. So it's no wonder I turned to the game's traveling companions instead. Because you are the Beastmaster, meaning you can tame a variety of wildlife to journey with you. Your first companion is a wolf, which makes sense, we had domesticated wolves by this point. However, I was only a couple hours into the game by the time I had tamed lions, jaguars, and bears, so it gets off the rails pretty fast. Although you can eventually ride saber-toothed tigers into battle, so I'm by no means complaining about historical accuracy because that shit is awesome. You'd think combat would be more entertaining and visceral with bare skin coming into contact with rocks, sharp teeth, and whatnot, but it's pretty bad to be honest. It feels very floaty, and I often found myself spinning around while mashing the attack button to bash people to death. It lacks the fun of typical Far Cry combat, because Far Cry has decent gunplay, but has really relegated melee to stealth takedowns. Now, melee is a primary means of combat because arrows are limited, and they took a playbook from Skyrim where "it just works" is the guiding phrase for how melee combat feels. However, I can't knock it too much, because hurling a spear point blank into someone's chest and watching them crumple while my bear companion chews on another guy's innards is immensely entertaining, so it still has that fun element that keeps you going for the runtime. Now for my complaints. Obviously, combat is wonky. I played on a controller, which is fully supported, and regardless of how I changed my sensitivities, I always felt like I couldn't quite dial in the responsiveness to be where I want. And before anybody says, "That's because controller bad," there are plenty of games that get the responsiveness right on controllers. I'm not talking about making precise 2-kilometer headshots, just smooth, react to my input gameplay. I was also not thrilled with the game world, but let me explain that one. It totally makes sense, and it feels like a plausible world space, but it was just so samey. You get huge chunks that are just the same type of environment and terrain with not much to break it up. Things like what wildlife pop up in the area do change, but with such primitive technology available and low population count, there isn't much to break it up like a typical game would with civilization and buildings and whatever else. It's just you in the wild, which is fine, but it doesn't create a very good sense of progression or adventure when you're just running through forest for 500 meters between objectives, and then the objective is also forest. I don't have much more to say about this game. It's a first-person shooter in the Neolithic era, and it surprisingly works. Most games would be a colony sim or some other type of management game if they focused on cavemen, but Ubisoft only makes one type of game, so they did this, and I'm grateful for it because I liked this game. It's cheap, it doesn't require a graphics card that can split atoms, and I can eat people, so overall I say this is a solid recommendation from me.